inclusive of all humanity. But this sort of healing of divisions does not come easily. Just because a Jewish peasant itinerant preacher was executed 2,000 years ago does not immediately make clear how this racial healing in today's time is supposed to occur. And at the General Synod, I shall experience some of this as well. For decades, the United Church of Christ has been working to become a denomination that is racially diverse. In fact, this year we elected as our president and general minister of the church an African American man. Now, of the 5 officers of the church, only 1 is Caucasian, and none of them are Caucasian male. Well, also for the last few years, the denomination has been discussing a restructuring plan. And currently, we are governed by 4 separate, completely independent corporate boards. The plan would create 1 governing board. It's believed to be more efficient, less expensive, more flexible. There are a host of reasons why the people that support it. But there is an outspoken group of minorities, not all minorities, but some, who are strongly opposed to the reorganization plan. They are angered and hurt by it because they believe that it will lessen minority representation. That if each conference only gets to elect 1 person instead of 4, that the result will be a less diverse governing body. And of course, there's a sense in which they might be correct about that. Because on a smaller board, there is no way that it will be able to represent diversity quite as adequately as 4 boards do. And so the issue has become one of trusting each other, to listen to each other, to perspectives that are not one's own, to represent views that are not one's own. This is one of the reasons that the denomination has been encouraging us for the last year to have sacred conversations on race. Well, part of what happened at the Synod is that those who opposed the plan protested it at every moment when part of it would pass. At one moment, I found myself on the opposite side of the song, "We Shall Overcome." Not an experience I had ever had before. I am normally one holding hands and then they're singing with those who sing, "We Shall Overcome." And it had a deep emotional impact upon me. And it bore witness to how difficult it could be, even in this incredibly intentional group of people, to heal these sorts of divisions. And yet we are told that Jesus Christ is offered as the cornerstone of a new humanity which will do just that. So a helpful approach to this topic has been developed by various Korean theologians. In the Korean tradition, there is a concept called Han, H-A-N. Grace Ji-Sun Kim has described Han this way. It is the deep spiritual pain that rises out of the unjust experience of the people. Han is something which may be accumulated over time, even psychologically and spiritually affecting generations. Han is what I think leads to singing "We Shall Overcome" to a crowd that is normally on your side. Many theologians have drawn important parallels between this Korean concept and the Judeo-Christian concept of sin because it helps us to see how abusive social systems can spiritually and psychologically damage people over time. Han, then, is something that people need to be released from, to be healed of. So finding salvation is not simply a matter of believing something new or of changing your behavior. And so I think that the racial and ethnic divisions of humans has resulted in something like this Korean concept of Han, a psychological and spiritual damage which is accumulated over time. And so what can release us from its control? Kim herself focuses on the Christian idea of grace, and in particular on its healing aspects. Grace, she writes, is an experiential reality and not just a concept. again picture the Macedonia AME Church, Sister Aura Wallace singing. When we experience God's grace, we experience unconditional love. And it's that unconditional love which breaks the power that sin has over us. We are then empowered to live with a new sense of our own freedom and self-worth, which gives us the courage to then set others free. She writes that grace must be understood as more than the forgiveness of one's own sin. It is also the strength to confront the sins and injustices of others. So let's now turn to the gospel passage. It opens with the disciples returning from this radical mission that Jesus has sent them on. They were to travel around the villages of Galilee, taking nothing to support themselves, relying each and every day upon the hospitality of strangers who would invite them into their homes. This early Jesus movement was built upon encounters, relationships formed across the territory. And so now when the disciples have returned, Jesus has become famous, and these huge crowds are turning out to see him and to be healed by him. So what's happening when Jesus is touched by those who are sick? Lisa Isherwood, the feminist theologian, writes that this Christ is the one who knew the power of touch to heal or to destroy, and understood that the kingdom rests on the way in which we choose to touch each other and our world. Being touched by Jesus, or touching Jesus, exploded something within those who were sick, something which healed them. These are the grace-filled encounters of Jesus. But these ancient stories are not the only stories. Excitedly, not the only testimony of the healing power of Jesus is from first century Jewish peasants. It is the story that James Cone tells about worship in Dearden, Arkansas. It is what the church voice, it is what the chorus of voices with which I began this sermon also testified to. That even in our own time and in multiple cultures, ethnicities, races, genders, and sexual orientations, Jesus is still experienced as the grace-filled power to liberation, healing, and reconciliation. So you might experience Jesus differently if you're an African American man or a Korean woman. But what is common to these experiences is the power of Jesus encountered here and now to bring transformation to our lives. There is something about Jesus which continues to explode something within us, transforming us. From the early church fathers comes this teaching of Christian orthodoxy. God became man in order that man might become God. Meister Eckhart taught that it is not relevant that Jesus was born 2,000 years ago if he is not born anew in you. And contemporary Korean theologian Kwak Kwi-lan teaches that Christ is not one but many, and that everyone has the potential to attain the status that Jesus attained. And this, I believe, was the meaning of Pentecost. The sending forth of the Holy Spirit, which awakens the power of God within each of us and unites us together into a new humanity, the household of God, of which Jesus is the cornerstone, but of which each of us, each of you, is a part. And so who is Jesus Christ for us today?